Hey everybody, Chattis Leo here, host of Our Native Land Through Czech podcasts in Victoria, British Columbia. My guest today is Jodi. Jodi was raised on the Okanese First Nation Reserve 81 kilometers outside of Regina. Her love of baking stems from her cookum, which is her grandmother, who was a journeyman chef and cooked at the last residential school in LeBret, Saskatchewan. Jodi loves to bake for her two daughters, her husband, and his wrestling crew. Jodi Robson has been a longtime fan of the Great Canadian Baking Show. She had always wished to be one of the competitors. When she saw an ad about being a contestant on the show, she filled out the application immediately. She didn't think that she would be picked, but she was also thought that there was no harm in trying. Now, Jodi can be seen on season 3 of the Great Canadian Baking Show, now streaming on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and CBC Gem app. Jodi, welcome to Our Native Land.
Hi, happy to be here.
I'm happy you're here. Jodi, let's get right into it. I've seen you baking on the show. You have produced some amazing stuff. All I have to say is wow. Like, it's incredible. That's why I wanted to reach out to you. It's beautiful. Tell me a bit more about your passion for baking and how it all got started.
Sure. So I've been baking for longer than I can remember. I started off baking with my cookum.
Hmm.
So as children, my cousins and myself would always be at cookum's house. It's just kind of like the gathering place on the res.
Hmm.
And she would have us in the kitchen while she prepared food for us. And being inquisitive and also like the chubby kid who wanted to try everything as it was being made, I was right in there hands on.
Yeah.
And she just kind of like encouraged it. She's like, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
And I just kept going. I kept experimenting with different ingredients and whatever I could pull out of the deep freeze or whatever we found in the bush when we were outside playing.
Yeah.
I'd bring it in and be like, can we make this? Can we eat it? And she would let us. So most of the time.
Yeah. Well, that's crazy.
And yeah, and we just kind of kept going with it.
I find I think as a child, especially in the kitchen, if your grandmother, your mother lets you get into the ingredients, that texture must really trigger something as a child, almost like Play-Doh, right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
It's a very sensory experience. And well, it's just fun, right? And to be able to be encouraged by her to go ahead and make a mess, it's okay, we'll clean it up together after.
Yeah.
That had a huge impact on my ability to be confident in going ahead and trying new things. Because I mean, historically, we don't have baking in our culture. We weren't bakers and desserts and stuff. It was more like sustenance.
Hmm.
We just prepared food to survive.
Hmm.
So the having the ability to try to find new things and just explore was huge for me.
Hmm. Can you tell me like a couple things you might have grabbed out of the bush and just she said you could cook it? Like I'm curious about that.
Oh, um, in the summer, it was a big thing for like the grandmothers, both my Nakota Mikush and my Kuka Beanie. They would just give all the grandkids a bucket and send us out and say, okay, pick berries.
Hmm.
And I mean, first couple of tries, you had no idea what you were looking for.
Hmm.
But as we got older, we got really proficient
Hmm.
in picking raspberries and Saskatoons, pinch cherries or choke cherries,
Hmm.
and gooseberries. Gooseberries were really hard for me to find. I still to this day struggle picking it.
Hmm.
But like my other cousins, some of them were really good at it.
Yeah.
We also learned at an early age to not give my cousin Chad the bucket because he was supposed to run it back to the house, and
Yeah.
by the time it got there, there was nothing
You
left.
just eat it.
He'd eat it on the way. I'm like, why? We were supposed to eat that today, all of us.
Yeah, it sounds especially like those gooseberries are like trying to find chanterelle mushrooms or something. Some people are really good at it, know where it is, and other people, it's a constant challenge.
I've tried mushroom picking in BC, and it is so difficult.
Yeah,
That is a hard job to do.
it is. Yeah, very specific. Okay, so let's get into the call. So you were accepted onto the show. You get the call. Take us through the process. What happens?
So I'm going to be very honest on this. It was like a dream.
Hmm.
Everything just kind of blurred together, and it happened so fast. From the night I applied, which at like 4 a.m. because I had just got off work. Um, I applied. I got the call the next day. Do you want to do an interview? Okay. So
Ah.
I did, and then I got the audition that day after the interview. They're like, "Okay, come do an audition."
Yeah.
2 days later, And then immediately after the audition, we're like, okay, you're going to be on the show. It was probably a 2 week period from the application to like flying.
That's so quick.
It was, it didn't hit me till I was already on the plane. I'm
Yeah.
like, what am I doing? It's, this is happening. And I felt so unprepared. And then I started panicking.
Yep.
Well, because I'm like a rustic res cook. I don't have this precise approach to baking.
Yeah.
There's no like there's no precision. I don't use a scale. I don't use a thermometer.
Just
It's
like
like
grandma, like a handful of this, a
I,
pinch of that. There's
I,
no calculation to it.
entirely. It's all by feel.
Hmm.
So and I started panicking about that because I know that I was up against chefs that are very like experienced and
Hmm.
have been baking for a very long time, but they're very knowledgeable about using ingredients and measurements and recipes, and that's not my thing. So that's a little bit out of my element.
Yeah. Okay. So you're hopping on the plane. You get there. This is pre-pandemic or just
Yeah,
before? Yeah.
it was pre-pandemic by about a year
Hmm.
because the pandemic hit in 2020, and we had finished airing live in the winter of 2019.
Okay.
So
So
yeah,
just
we
before.
missed. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, no, so you get there and tell me a bit about because you see the show and it's obviously very set up and very meticulous. Like, did you find that what's it like to work in like a show kitchen as opposed to you doing it like at home?
Uh, oh, there's so much difference.
Yeah,
For example, I don't have a stand. Well, I didn't have a stand mixer. I've been graciously gifted one since my time on the show.
yeah.
But prior to being on the show, everything I did was by hand with a whisk or a wooden spoon
Wow.
because that's the way I learned.
Yeah,
So I get there and everybody has a stand mixer on their station. They're like, you're expected to use it. Like, can somebody show me how? Because I have no idea how to turn this thing on.
they must have
So
thought like, oh, she's not gonna last if she doesn't even know how to use this thing.
I was honestly, that was my thought. I'm like, oh, I look so stupid right now because I don't know how to use any of this stuff. And then like there was one episode where everybody brought out thermometers and they're testing their bread
Yeah,
with a thermometer,
yeah,
and I'm like looking around because that's what I do when I panic. I start observing everybody else,
yeah.
and I'm like, okay, they're all using thermometers. I've never used a thermometer ever since, and I've been making bread since I was like 10 years old.
Yeah,
So I'm like, okay, well, I know my bread is done based on the weight alone,
yeah,
but they're using one. So I dug in through the drawer I had, and I pulled out a thermometer and I stuck it in the bread.
yeah.
And the host come over and he goes, "What are you looking for?" And I go, "I don't know, a number," because I didn't know what temperature is the bread done at. I don't know.
I'm just doing what everybody else is doing so I don't look weird, but now you're really putting a spot on it, aren't you?
Yeah,
Okay.
it felt really. It was so embarrassing to be called out.
I can only imagine. Okay, so it's been noted that you were wearing a different beaded necklace, kind of like you are right now, prior to you getting on every show, and you've also displayed the Nakota language on a cake as well. Can you tell me a bit about the significance in making your heritage as front and center as possible while you were participating on the show?
So the beadwork just kind of happened. I had brought a few pieces because I mean, you don't know how far you're going to make it.
Hmm.
So I'd only brought enough for the first two episodes because I thought at the very minimum I should make it through the first two episodes.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, it's really important to showcase my Indigenous culture. I'm really proud to be Nakota Cree, and I see relatability when people wear symbols of our culture. You know, so I only brought two pieces, and then I ended up making it to the week three. So I had to all of a sudden had to make a piece. So we went to the closest craft store, and I'm beating till
Yeah.
like 5 a.m. I had to be up at 6 to be on set.
Yeah.
I basically didn't sleep that night
Yeah.
because I had to make a piece, and then all of a sudden, I was rushing every time I'd make it to the next level. I was rushing to try to get a piece done for the next week.
Yeah.
Um, and the Nakota language on the cake, that was really important to me because I had just started learning Nakota. My grandmother always spoke it around me, but I never actually paid attention. So I didn't actually learn my language
Hmm.
until I started university and it was a class that was offered. So I started taking the Nakota classes at school and I was really proficient at reading it and writing it. somewhat speaking it,
Hmm.
and I did it as a tribute to my grandmother, my mikush,
Hmm.
to write the language on a cake to honor her. She passed away just before I got on the show, so
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
uh, thank you. We were really close, and I wanted some representation of her because she always believed in me,
Mhm.
and yeah, it was an honor to our culture.
That's really sweet. Now, speaking of culture, you said Nakota. Um,
Yes,
as for people out here in BC, not all of us would know exactly what you mean by that. Can you expand briefly on what it is, Nakota, where it's from, the language?
sure. So Nakota originate the Nakota Nation that I'm part of is Carry the Kettle. It also goes by Chegakin now, which is the Nakota words for carry the kettle. It is a Siouan tribe, similar to Nakota, Lakota, Dakota, all those tribes. They're mostly located around the Montana area and southern Saskatchewan.
Hmm.
So, and Carry the Kettle typically was established around the Cypress Hills area, which is along the border of Saskatchewan and Alberta, but they were relocated to land closer to just outside of Regina, actually, by Indian Head.
Okay. Quite a diverse group of tribes. It sounds like that all got dispersed.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Before we dive into some Bannock questions, which I'm sure if people that know you, you've talked about Bannock in the past, do you think that beating that you did prior to the show, and do you think the beating has integrated your kind of skill set on decorating cakes? Because I can see the one you're wearing now. For people that are just listening, it's a beautiful bead artwork, very big circle in the middle, and then two sort of flapping squares on the side with additional symbols in the inside. Do you think there's a skill to that that's transferable with your baking?
Absolutely. Actually, because of the fine detail required for beadwork and quill work,
Hmm.
it definitely has an impact on my ability when it comes to decorating things like sugar cookies or fine detailing on cakes. I Yeah, I see a lot of comparison between it, and I've had a lot of people reach out and recommend, could you do like a beadwork design on cookies for me? And
Oh, that's cool.
I'm like, yeah, it's a really fun idea, and I would love to play more with that.
Yeah,
It's I have tried it. It's very time consuming
yeah, I
because
can imagine.
each little dot is has to dry before you add the next color in, so that it doesn't
Absolutely.
melt together. But
It's speaking of time consuming, do you feel like the pressure of the time you had on the show has that given you a crunch on your baking? Pun intended, I guess, or unintended. But is your baking sped up now that you've finished that show, or you've kind of just went back to how you used to do things?
it has sped up. Like I mentioned earlier, I was gifted a stand mixer following the show by my hubby because he said, well, if you use it on the show and it makes it easier, you should just use it at home.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay. So we have a stand mixer now. So in a lot of senses, it has sped up, but there are certain recipes where you can't speed up the process. It has to be done slow and meticulous. And that's just the way it is. Like sourdough, it takes me 72 hours to make 2 loaves of sourdough bread.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a long process, but it's well worth it.
Absolutely, especially when you get that reception from the people that are eating it and they like it, and obviously you did well since you were ended up being the last three, so I can only imagine how well it tastes. So it's inevitable that I ask you about your Bannock. You've been quoted that you undoubtedly have spent the last few years trying to perfect it and make the best Bannock possible. So can you tell me why it's so important for you to pursue this indigenous dish to this extent?
Well, I'm sure you're familiar in Indian country, particularly in Saskatchewan's area. There's a massive competition between who has the best bannock.
Yeah.
Like it's
Oh,
kind of
for
like an
sure.
underlying joke, right?
Yeah, I
Well,
got the
who makes
best
the best?
Bannock. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm gonna get married first because I make the best bannock, kind of thing. When with all your
it's
cousins,
like a trophy thing, right? Yeah.
it's absolutely a trophy thing. In fact, I have aprons from like competitions we've entered that say best bannock or almost best bannock.
Oh.
Yeah, from before I got better at it.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so
yeah, your grandmother used to make it really good, and I was reading a little story how she kind of gave you some reassurance about your recipe.
actually, I'm sorry to both of them as they both passed on. But My Kukumbini, which is my mother's mother, she had the best Bannock. I've never had Bannock that is ever compared to the quality of her Bannock. And maybe it's because it's nostalgic for me and I remember it when I was a kid and it was the Bannock we had the most often. Um, she passed away before I ever perfected my recipe. So like I mean, when she was still with us, it was hockey pucks.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
unfortunately, unfortunately, she never got to give me the approval or teach me the proper way to do it.
Yeah.
But my Nana Frida now, that's my Mikush.
Hmm.
She's my dad's mother.
Okay.
She was with us up until 2019, and she was the one who in 2017, I believe it was, gave me the approval, like the grandmother's approval on Bannock.
Yeah.
She came over and I had made some and I gave it like we were eating a big family meal and she ate it. She goes, "Oh my girl, yours is the best." But she said it in Dakota and I don't know why it meant so much more that she said it in Dakota, but I was like, I swear my head was swollen for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I just walked around telling everybody, so you know.
Just do 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 do. That's my Bannock, right?
Yep, that was me. I did that.
Yeah.
So
And I think family recognition, especially from somebody you respect, at the end of the day, would mean more to most people than a trophy and an apron. So that must have been really special.
oh yeah, I bring it up all the time.
I helped you. Yeah, helped to bring it up.
Yeah, thank you.
So what's been the overall reception? Yeah, you've been on the show. You're a finalist. What's been your feedback so far, and the reception, the life after the show, right?
So it's been very different in unexpected ways. I never assumed that well, I don't know why I didn't think of it that way, but I never thought that the show would get me recognizable to the point where if I'm out shopping and I run into somebody who's seen me on the show, they come up and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I know you from the show."
Yeah.
I forget about it for a minute and then I get caught off guard because I'm super awkward in public.
Yeah.
It's always nice though. I think my favorite uh, outcome from being on the show is the kids. There are a lot of young people that watch the show at like as young as my children, and they're really excited about it. They get excited because they know me from this reserve, or somebody's auntie or their mom is like a distant relative of mine. So there's a relatability that if they want to go that far, they can get on TV too. And there's a lot of young people that have started baking, and they'll reach out and send me pictures or tell me about what they made,
Yeah.
and I really like that. That
Yeah.
is my favorite part because it I remember being a small kid and you I didn't have a lot of representation on TV to relate with. I like to watch baking shows, but I mean it was Martha Stewart and the Urban Peasant. It was like it wasn't people that I could directly relate to. And for them to be able to say, "Hey, I know you and I want to be like you." That just is so cool to hear because it it was an unexpected role model position to be thrust into.
Yeah, it's
And
it's important to see somebody who looks like you and know that you can do that, right? That's the biggest thing, is that you can see somebody in your line of work or a passion of yours, but if you don't see anybody that looks like you, it can put a damper, I think, on some of those children's mind, like, like, well, I guess I'll just do what I'm doing and hopefully it works out, or
yeah, yeah, it's just really cool to they inspire me as much as they say that I inspire them.
Hmm.
It's just really cool to see the impact it's having on people, especially back home in my community. I like going back to the community. I mean, pre-COVID,
Hmm.
um, just to hang out with everybody because it's just cool to see what's going on out there.
Yeah. That's really cool. And I can only imagine too, like trying to find a relation is like, oh, my cousin was on TV. I'm like, you sure she's your cousin? You're just saying that? That's so
See,
cool.
I'm from southern Saskatchewan, Nakota, and Cree, so I'm related to everybody.
Everybody,
And
everybody, everybody's tied into Jodi.
yep. So I
Okay.
had to go to Manitoba, Manitoba for a husband.
Yeah, there you go. Good call. Okay, so final question before I let you go. What does the future hold for Jodi Robson? You are the finalist, one of the finalists of season 3. So, in my opinion, I felt like you've had a certain amount of success behind your pursuit to the bacon world. Have you put any thought moving forward? Are you just gonna keep cooking for the wrestling team, which is great too? I'm sure they're super happy that they got a famous baker now. But what does your future look like?
Well, to be honest with you, I've had a lot of requests come in from fans and publishers to start compiling a cookbook. And I explained to them, well, I don't do recipes. Like I'm not really a fine-tuned recipe kind of person. All my recipes that are written down in a book are like I have the list of ingredients, but I don't have any measurements.
Yeah,
So and they said that's fine. Can you write it like you would
yeah,
like you would tell your daughter how you're making it,
yeah,
and then include the stories
yeah,
because they seem to really like the stories that I shared on the show
yeah.
and the stories that I attach to the images on my Instagram account. So that's in the works. It's
Mhm.
quite a process,
Yeah, I can
but
imagine to write a book after all this. That's pretty exciting. You could just put like make the title like you figure it out. So you just like here's the
that's a great
ingredients,
idea.
you do it.
That is a great idea, actually, because that's basically what it is at this
Yeah,
point.
I'll let you have that one. I won't hold on to that. That's awesome. Well, you know what, Jodi? I'm really happy for you. Like I said, I was just walking into the bedroom a few weeks ago, and my wife was watching the show, and she pointed you out, and he said, it'd be really cool to talk to Jodi. You should really try. And I'm glad you reached out, or glad you responded to me when I reached out, and I'm glad you're an inspiration for young people and Indigenous people. So thank you so much for coming on our native land. I greatly appreciate it. I had a fun time talking to you.